First of all, thanks so much to Oregon PSR for inviting me out here tonight. It's really an honor to be with you. And, with my work as a journalist, I've been covering Iraq now for about 7 years, and then just finished the book on the price that the U.S. military is paying to continue with this failed policy. And, it's my job to basically look at the darker side of what's going on with all of this. And it tends to make me a bit cynical and pessimistic, and sometimes I struggle to kind of find where is the light, what hope do we have for the future when we look at a government that is failing to fulfill the promises of change that brought it into power. But being with you here tonight and just hearing the short bios of the judges of the essay contest, and then seeing the winners of the essay contest, and then just meeting and talking with some of you folks in the room, and with an understanding of what PSR is all about and what y'all have done over the decades, I certainly feel some genuine hope just being here, because it can certainly get rough when I'm overseas writing about these terrible stories. Many of them I'll talk with you about tonight. And then to come back home to the United States and to actually be among a group of people that are doing such good and important work in so many different areas, and especially the younger folks tonight. I want to congratulate again the winners of the essay contest, and I think we should give them another round of applause. I mean, out of everything I just said, you younger folks writing these essays with such already a deep understanding of what's important and what needs to happen in the world and how we should live our lives, that I think gives me hope more than anything, especially right now. I was invited to talk about the health effects of war, and so what I thought I would cover through some of my more recent reporting, as well as a lot of the stuff in my more recent book, would be to talk about, first of all, the effects of the ongoing occupations on members of the U.S. military, because I spend a pretty significant amount of time in my second book on this, particularly the psychological effects. And then I want to talk about health effects to the Iraqi people, specifically the effects of depleted uranium, which was mentioned briefly earlier, and the effects of that on the Iraqi civilian population, as well as the effects on U.S. soldiers. First, I do want to highlight the cost of the wars, both these occupations, on people in the U.S. military. Never before in U.S. history have we had a situation where we had people doing repeated deployments into one or two or both of different wars. Some people doing 4 deployments, 5, 6, even 7 repeated deployments. And this is causing, as I feel like I argue confidently in my book, a breakdown in the U.S. military. And we have a military that is in a state of crisis today, surpassed only by the average citizen of Iraq or Afghanistan as far as the price being paid and how much suffering is happening. Members of the U.S. military who have served in Iraq or Afghanistan are paying an extremely high price. When they come back to the United States after serving, they've been maligned, tossed aside, neglected, and largely forgotten. Today, as we speak, more U.S. war veterans are killing themselves at home than are dying in open combat while overseas. 1,000 veterans who are technically receiving care from the Department of Veterans Affairs, the VA, are attempting suicide every single month, and 18 veterans from all wars, not just Iraq and Afghanistan, but 18 veterans from all wars kill themselves every single day in this country. As if surviving their deployments is not enough, when they return home, soldiers face a different kind of battle, against the Veterans Administration to try to get the benefits that they're due. Upon getting a valid discharge from the military, theoretically, they're entitled to lifetime health care in the VA. But in the 6 months leading up to March 31, 2008, nearly 1,500 veterans died while waiting to learn whether their disability claims were going to be approved by their government. Veterans who appeal a VA decision to deny one of their disability claims must wait an average of nearly 4.5 years for their answer. As of March 25, 2008, 287,790 war veterans from both occupations had filed disability claims with the Veterans Administration. Excuse me, I'm a bit dried out. I just flew in from Santa Fe today. Being basically abandoned by their own government, veterans find themselves, oh, thanks so much. Veterans find themselves in a situation where many of them feel tragically that they have no other chance but to resort to suicide. And I want to talk a little bit more about why these suicide rates are as staggeringly high as they are, the ones I cited earlier. Because we're looking at a situation where with both occupations, more than 500,000 troops so far, and counting, have been deployed more than one time. By December of 2006, it was estimated that 50% of the troops in Iraq were serving on their second tour, and another 25% were on their third or fourth tour. These numbers are far, far higher today. The military is so overstretched that troops are being redeployed after already being diagnosed with medical conditions that should prohibit them from being deployed. For example, troops already diagnosed with TBI, traumatic brain injury, which is what happens when they survive a roadside bomb nearby their patrol, or already diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, are being deployed anyway. So far, more than 43,000 troops listed as medically unfit have been deployed anyway. By October 2007, the Army reported that approximately 12% of combat troops in Iraq and 17% of combat troops in Afghanistan were having to cope by taking antidepressants and sleeping pills. More active duty Marines committed suicide in 2008 than in any year since the U.S. invasion of Iraq was launched in 2003. That's just in the Marine Corps. In the Army, 2006 was a record number of suicides in the U.S. Army. That was since they first started keeping statistics for suicide in 1980. 2006 was surpassed by 2007, which was surpassed by 2008, which was surpassed by 2009, and the trends are continuing this year. I interviewed a psychiatrist who was working at Camp Lejeune, the largest Marine Corps base on the eastern seaboard, and he described the situation, the psychological situation of soldiers who do repeated deployments and basically come back home and don't get PTSD treatment that they desperately need. He described it as something as psychological implosion. He said, we don't even really have, in my opinion, the terminology in the APA to address the situation where when you put people in one repeated combat tour after another and they come back home, he said it's basically like the motherboard of your computer is fried. And when that happens, you don't try to adjust the software or change it. You basically have to unplug it and just start all over. And that's, in his opinion, doing psychotherapy and treatment for people in this state, once formerly strong, committed U.S. Marines, now shattered, broken human beings. He describes it as a sort of an equivalent of psychological neurosurgery. And that's what has to happen for each one of these people that comes back home. But then to get an idea on how many people are coming back home with these types of problems, the RAND Corporation, a military-linked think tank, released a report, I believe it was in spring 2008, showing that of the then 1.6 million people who had been cycled through both occupations, that 300,000 came back home diagnosed with PTSD or severe depression. And I think that's speaking from personal experience, I think that's an extremely low figure. That if you deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan and leave a base or leave the green zone and actually go out among the people of those countries and see what's happening, and then of course subject yourself to attacks, random violence, chaos, it's impossible to not come home without some degree of post-traumatic stress disorder. Compounding the problem, in an effort to keep enough boots on the ground for both occupations, on June 22, 2006, the Army increased the permissible enlistment age to 42 from a previous limit of 40. This follows a previous rise in the age limit from 35 to 40 in March 05. By summer 07, the Army had grown so desperate for recruits that it began to recruit indiscriminately in violation of its own criteria. It accepted individuals with health and weight issues, lower academic test scores, and even those with criminal records. By July 2007, the number of incoming soldiers with prior felony arrests or convictions had more than tripled over the previous 5 years, and in the first half of 2007, the Army had accepted an estimated 8,000 recruits with rap sheets. So I don't know if you remember, but a little ways back, I think it was about 6 months ago or so, the military came out with this press release saying, we have had the biggest recruiting year in our history since they did away with the draft in 1974. We've had the biggest recruiting year ever. And a lot of us believed it, myself included, because I thought, yeah, economic draft, do the math. There's no other jobs. Of course, everybody's going into the military. They're promising you won't have to go see combat. They're promising health benefits, education, et cetera. So yeah, of course. Turns out that was a totally fabricated report. While there has been a slight uptick in military recruiting, they had ended up including a bunch of National Guards people and these types of folks. And actually, they hadn't had the biggest, not even close to the biggest recruiting year they'd had. So my point is that the military remains dramatically overstretched. We still have nearly 100,000 troops in Iraq. We have almost the exact same number. Actually, we have 98,000 right now, according to the military, in Iraq, and now 98,000 in Afghanistan. And I can tell you from my research, don't expect that number to fall very much, if at all, in Iraq, and expect the number in Afghanistan to increase. And so when we add all this together, we do not see a bright future for people in the U.S. military that are being deployed repeatedly. We still have things like the individual ready reserve and stop loss in effect that is also compounding the problem by keeping people in the military beyond their original contracts that they had signed up for. Shifting gears, I want to talk about there's many massive health crises in Iraq today, but one of the more recent ones that have come to light is that resulting from the use of a weapon called depleted uranium, which I know PSR is all too aware of. For those who aren't as aware or so aware of depleted uranium munitions, as a weapon, it's very effective because it's a very, very extremely heavy metal. It's an incendiary weapon, and it will literally hit like a projectile, a DU projectile would hit a tank and literally go right through the armor and destroy what's inside. So it's really good as a weapon. There's a problem, is it's basically a low-grade nuclear weapon also. This planet is approximately 4.5 billion years old. That is also the half-life of depleted uranium. This problem is going to be with us for a while. The U.S. admits to having used 325 tons of depleted uranium during the 1991 attack on Iraq, and so far more than 1,200 tons and counting in the current war in Iraq. And of course, it's being used in Afghanistan also.